What is going on, YouTube? Thanks for stepping into the chamber once again. With My Heroes Nationals coming out in just under a month, I'm going to start covering a lot of the different decks that I think you guys are going to be seeing in Nationals, kind of what the cards do, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and a couple little things you can do to help improve those matchups. Because with set 3, we're in kind of a brave new world. There's a lot of new decks, a lot of older decks, got a lot of new support. So the format that we knew is dead and gone. In case in point, today we're going to be talking about Deku 2. Deku 2 is a character that in set 2 really never did anything. I don't think he even has a top at like a major event, let alone a win. But with a couple of new cards coming out next set, he's kind of becoming like a premier. Rogue might be a little strong of a word, but he's a new strategy a lot of people are very hyped for. So today we're going to be talking about kind of how the strategy works, what makes it tick. So that way you can be better equipped to play against it in your games when you sit down and play. So to begin, we're going to talk about the character. It's a very straightforward character. Enhance, pitch a card, give your attack +1 speed, +3 damage as long as it's a punch. We are on, this character is basically on all punches all the time. So that condition isn't a condition, it's just pitch a card, pump your attack. There's response once per turn where you can commit a foundation and build a foundation when you check it, as long as you already have a duplicate. So this is actually like a really powerful response, and honestly, I think at least in set 2 was the main reason to play the character. Now you kind of play him for both halves. Because it's very common for us to check foundations we really care about, you know, cards like Passing the Torch or New Training Method or Taiyaki Fanatic, you know, the list goes on. And the fact that this character could just like realistically commit a face down and build in a duplicate, like, oh, I've already got one passing, but I checked it. Let me just commit like my flipped like New Training Method or Manly Passionate guy. Boom, now I have a second one. Like, very, very powerful enhance or in response. So, like I said, you know, he's a new character. He's going to be getting some new cards and tools. But first, I want to talk about some of this older cards that you're probably going to see play with this guy. None of these are technically guarantees, but they're likely to see play. Back Alley Haymaker. A lot of people know this card. It's a 4-mana for 5. EX2 Sun 2, so it's incredibly fast when it needs to be. Deku can pump its stats, draws cards. It can build in 0 diff, so it can become basically a 4 difficulty if you need it to be. With Deku, he can pitch a 0 difficulty, and then you can build in with Back Alley to make his like enhance kind of free, especially if you don't have a 0. Very, very good card. Probably a little too good. Setup Strike is another card that's been around in Punch X forever. Just makes your next punch very fast. You know, Setup Strike into Texas Smash is a great way to like connect for big damage. Again, especially because the character can also pump our punches. Speaking of Texas Smash, this is another attack that's commonly going to see play in these decks. It's a 4-high for 3, which isn't very good, but it comes off a punch becoming a 4-high for 7, which is very damaging. It's got a good mid block, and then optionally, you can discard a card to pump the stats on your next punch. And when we get to Tetsu Thrashing and One with Nature, you'll see that like you actually have a lot of tools to make this like discard cost not as big as you think. One for all full cowling. This is like his best like string ender. You know, you can like play a few punches, discard your whole hand due to his effect, and then on full cowling after you pump it. So it's a 5-high for 9. You can then just like dump nothing and then refill your hand. Very good effect. And then Heroic Strike is a card I don't see a lot of people playing around with, but I think it'll see some play next set. Because this is basically like stun 2, stun 3. It's like a second Haymaker kind of. Except it doesn't use the stun keyword, so it gets around a lot of stun hate. If you play this deeper into a string, this can easily be like a stun 3 or in theory even a stun 4, you know, just like commit out an opponent's entire board. Kind of an underrated attack, I think, for this character, and in general. Foundation-wise, passing. Everybody knows Passing the Torch. It's great draw power, and this character is particularly messed up because you're actually kind of likely to shred your entire hand on your own turn, depending. You know, once you're really going in, you know, play 3 punches, pump 3 punches. Oh look, that's 6 cards. I'm a 6-hand size character. Commit passing and draw 2 cards. So you're gonna see this Deku deck go in with like pump strings like these, and just pump them all, and then fill their hand back with a couple passings. There's also a lot of utility. I mean, like Manly Passionate guy is a well-established competitive staple. Clears your card pool, lets you block with foundations while building. You know, it's really good with this character because you can build in a foundation, and then if you check a copy of it later, you can commit your now face-down Manly Passionate guy. Now you have 2 copies of your best foundation, hopefully. Pull no punches. It's a great wall breaker tool. Snaps momentum. Clears your card pool. It's an excellent card. It's going to lose a little value because Thrashing is a 2-check, but we'll get there when we get there. Fnatic, this deck has access to actually like a pretty decent cancel. It's not Night Watch, but they can still cancel like basically any deadlock or off like, I don't know, quick creates, for example, any other like game-breaking deadlocks, first villain encounter, the newer deadlocks on some foundations, or just, you know, any other like troublesome enhance if it doesn't have to be a deadlock. But this does give some tools because this character tends to go into deadlock because of his response. And the new training method has been a competitive staple in like every deck that can run it. It helps smooth out your building. It's really cheeky when you play it off of other card effects. Super good with Ready, Get, Set, Go. Something this character doesn't have access to on good. But, sorry, I just paused for a second to double check, because I'm pretty sure it was Air, Earth, Life, but for some reason I couldn't remember if it was Air, Earth, Life or Good, Earth, Life, so I wanted to check that, but it's not. Yeah, he doesn't have access to Ready, Get, Set, Go on good, but still, he gets a lot of mileage out of this card. So you already see, like, with this character, it's kind of been like a value town based, just like obviously play punches, but you're playing like a relatively like fair game plan. You know, you're pumping the stats on your punches. You draw some cards here. You like discard them for your character or whatever to like pump your attacks, but he's not really doing anything like super crazy or unfair. And that's why classically he's been seeing play off of All Might 3. Here, we'll use this one because it looks better. Sorry about that, folks. Classically, he's been seeing play off of this character here as Punch Planet, All Might 3. Just for the, you know, he's an 8-hand size character, makes his punches very large. Typically plays a punch deck, makes his punches very large, or very fast, whatever you need. But he doesn't play well with Tetsu Thrashing, and that's kind of be the crux. I mean, like, these two cards here, Tetsu Thrashing and One with Nature, are the two biggest pieces that good punch decks are getting to kind of go to that next level. And personally, I don't know if this is going to be quite good enough to make them competitive staples, but I am super open to being wrong. Like, to be transparent, I don't think Thrashing is going to be quite good enough to make this character or this approach like a competitive staple in the current meta. But I'm gonna try to make it a competitive staple, man. I and a lot of other people. We're very stoked. Alright, so Thrashing. Thrashing is a 4 mid for 4 with a 2-check on a 4 difficulty attack. We don't care about the stun one, we only care really about the punch keyword. Thrashing's main gimmick is that if we have the same number or less cards in our hand than our opponent, we can pick up a Thrashing from our discard pile and put it into our hand. And we can do that any number of times per turn. So to a point, you can review Thrashings early or check Thrashings, and so that's from the 2-check, and it's like drawing a Thrashing. You're just going to get it later. So midway through the game, once you have 1, maybe 2 Thrashings in your discard pile, and you draw like your 3rd Thrashing, that 1 Thrashing is like 3 attacks. And Thrashing also either becomes a 6 damage move that becomes a 6 damage move that guarantees you pass your next check, or at least your next check isn't stressful, or it builds an attack off the top of your deck, giving you an extra foundation to work with, effectively like lowering the difficulty by 1. And since you're clearing an attack, you're also still more likely to check a 5. So this card has great inbuilt like flow guarantee at just like playing out strings of Thrashings. It's a little hard to like check all 3s with this attack, basically. The other half of this equation is One with Nature, where on its own, Nature lets you pitch a card to hack your opponent's block, basically, by 2. It makes their block modifier 2 bigger, so it's basically check hacking. But because it's not speed adjustment, it doesn't get caught by things that care about, you pumping speed. So this is a good tool against, like, pushing through certain forms of defense, anything that, like hates on attacks being faster than they should be. And then it has the added bonus of also giving it a bit of damage. And notably, this response doesn't care if you pitch a card for One with Nature. It just cares if you pitch a card. So if your opponent's probably going to take it anyways, you can pitch with Deku for +1/+3, and you still get the damage off One with Nature. So when you're playing against this deck, you have to be very mindful of the fact that like any random punch they play can easily get +4, +5 damage out of nowhere just by them pitching a card. And then finally, still useful, but not like nearly on the same level of like absurd. Wind Up Punch is just like a neat flow card, since it starts out as a 4 mid for 6 with a stun, which is already like efficient, but later in the game it becomes like a 4 difficulty. It's a 4 mid for 7, has powerful 3, so you can use this as like another extra 4. And if you look, like, especially because this can become a 4, like almost every punch in this line, like 5 4 4 5 4, kind of 4 4, like this is almost an all 4 lineup. So it's just one more 4 difficulty punch. So playing strings of punches with this character is not very intensive, especially because some of our moves, back alley haymaker, tetsu thrashing, they're also going to build in. Effectively, they'll build in foundations one way or another. Your character is also going to be building in foundations, so you're going to have a big board, a lot of foundations to play with. You're just going to make these long like punch attack strings. The main issue I have with this whole approach, though, is that it's reliant on you drawing a tetsu thrashing. And I mean, like, you're going to be playing 4 of this card, and that's probably not going to be a big deal, but you're going to have games where you check 2 and then you just like never see a 3rd one. And normally that's not a big deal because we check attacks all the time, but when it's like your linchpin strategy, and otherwise we're really not doing anything new off of any of this other than like one with nature. Like, I don't know, I think this approach is going to have consistency issues that stops it from being like a top tier strategy, but I'm very open to being proven wrong. But I still think a lot of people are going to be playing at Nationals, maybe with this character, maybe with Tetsu, maybe with All Might 3. You might see them having some iteration of these characters. You know, they might start with Deku, and then they'll side into Tetsu for aggro decks. So, yeah, but you're going to see some mixture of this, like, Punch Planet stuff. And I'm going to pull out Tetsu as well, because the tips for fighting against these characters is honestly pretty similar for the most part. Oops, sorry about that, guys. So there's a common through line for this for all 3 of these characters, where this guy pumps his stats based on the number of blocks that you have in your hand, basically. And Deku and Tetsu play nicely with thrashing, which also punishes you for holding a lot of blocks. One of the things you can do against this deck is be very selective about how many attacks you hold on to. It's better to like overextend a bit and use some card draw after you block once or twice, rather than just going into your turn with like 3 or 4 blocks. Because what you don't want to see is have Deku, who's a 6-hander, play back alley, going down to 5, pitch a card, he's at 4, you block a card, so he went from 3 cards to 2, he plays a Tetsu thrashing, he has 3 cards in hand, he discards something, maybe a Tetsu thrashing, goes down to 2, and now you're tied. And now they can pick up a Tetsu thrashing, and now you're stuck in this like a loop of Tetsu thrashings, like all the way down the chain. The same idea applies with Tetsu himself, except he's better about starting his chain since he's like a 5-hander baseline. So the math is a little bit easier for him. I don't know if we're going to see All Might 3 on this as much, because he's kind of an 8-handed character, so it's a bit of a non-bow between these two. And he also doesn't have a discard on his face, so he needs to find one with nature. But regardless, like, the big thing you want to do is pay attention if they're playing thrashings, and if they are, which they probably will be, especially if they're on one of these 2 characters. It is much better to go into pass turn with like 2 cards in hand, and doesn't matter what they are, use them for blocks. Like, you kind of want to make Deku have to pitch his whole hand to get into thrashings before he can start his thrashing loops. Because you have no cards in hand, he has to have no cards in his hand, and that opens him up to like breaker plays, or if you're on that symbol, you could hit him with learning the study. Oh god, I'm blank. I'm gonna look it up. It's like learning the standards. Yeah, learning the standards. Because if they don't have any cards in their hand, even if they pick up a thrashing, the thrashing is the last attack they have in their hand, it locks out their turn. So learning the standards is like a great tool for these against these decks. And the other thing is, on any of these characters, like, All Might less so because he usually pumps speed, but especially on these characters where they have to pitch cards and pump damage, when you can get away with it, try to hold block so you can block their punches over anything else that they're doing. Anything that they pump, that's like your biggest priority. So if they're like opening with a haymaker on a 5, like, and just leaving a 5 damage, sometimes it's better to take the 5 and save your block for the follow-up Texas smash that's going to become a 5 high for 10. obviously this depends on like, you know, block zones and board setup and whatnot, but yeah, try to block their big punches, and your health pool is going to go a lot further. If you block their like little pokes and then you get a hit with like the 10 damage Texas smashes, or like the 9-10 damage like full Kellings, like you'll die. You'll die very quickly, especially if you're a 7-hander. So I know that seems obvious, but it can be very easy to just like, oh, he's hitting me for like 5 damage, I should block this. Like, unless you can also afford to block the next couple attacks afterwards, sometimes it's better to take that first hit and block all the follow-ups. It again depends on a lot of factors, but yeah, that's my coverage for Deku Punch Planet. We're probably going to see it played on Midoriya too, but I think you'll probably see a couple Tetsu Tetsus, and I think you'll see a lot of the Midoriya 2 sideboard Tetsu for the aggro matchup. So you should be familiar with really all 3 of these characters and these cards. And yeah, just be mindful about your block math and the number of cards you hold on to, and you'll probably be okay. I'll be covering other competitive decks that I think people are going to be seeing at Nationals. We're going back and forth between video coverage like this and written coverage. This is kind of a new strategy, so I can't do this, but when available, I'll also be covering deck lists that have topped or won events for characters, and talk a bit more about how they're likely to improve from new cards, as opposed to just showing off like card pools. But since Deku, Tetsu have basically done nothing, and All Might 3 probably won't be playing this, but in theory he can, we're in kind of untested waters. But that's going to wrap me up for today. So make sure to like and subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments. And thanks again for stepping into the chamber. I'll see you in the next one, guys.